Buongiorno, everybody, and welcome to Super Respectable. My name is Tosh, and I have with me always my friend David Lewis. Buongiorno, Dave.
Buongiorno, Toshio. Come
Buongiorno.
stai?
Bien, is that right? I don't know.
Yeah, I think you're okay. Neither do I.
We're speaking Italian because Dave is actually in Italy. He's live on location. We're an international podcast, Dave. We have to travel around the world. We got to be in the places that we talk about. Yeah.
Exactly. I do it just for the listeners, not just for myself. Not
You're
like I
very.
need this vacation. But, the main thing I hope in this episode is that the internet in this hotel room holds out. But I
No
think
worry.
it's all right.
So you've been in Italy almost for 2 weeks. How is it? How's your experience? Are you guys having fun? What's it like with COVID? Give us a quick breakdown. I think most people are staying put, but I traveled a few months back. Now you're traveling, but what's it like?
Yeah, I mean, I was a bit apprehensive, like I said before we left, about exposing myself to the coronavirus after having just been semi-locked down in the Netherlands for 7, 8 months.
Yeah.
But like once you bite the bullet and go on the plane and arrive, as long as you take the precautions, I think it's generally okay.
Right.
People in the Netherlands have a very different approach to the rest of Europe.
Right.
Because as soon as you get to the airport, um, in Amsterdam, we had to put on the mask, and then from then on, the mask was on until we got to the hotel room in Rome.
Wow.
So it was a real shock to the system. There were people in hazmat suits on our plane, which was hilarious and frightening. Um, and yeah, just a lot more mask wearing, a lot less tourists in Rome and in Venice, where I am. A lot. It's European tourists, so there's not the American, the Canadian, the Asian tourists. It's mainly Germans, a few Dutch, a few British, but really it's much lower than what you would normally expect to see in Rome or Venice.
What was the plane journey like? Were you in your seats the entire time, or were you able to get up and use the washroom or walk around, or was it a full flight? I'm really interested in air travel at the moment.
Yeah, it was actually okay. It was a pretty short flight from Amsterdam to Rome, just under 2 hours. So there wasn't much need to move around the cabin, and they kind of encourage you to stay seated. But of course, you could use the facilities if needed. Um, yeah, they actually came by with food and drink service, which I was surprised about. But it was the Dutch airline KLM, so maybe shouldn't be too surprised.
And what about in Italy right now? Are you able to still do all the things that tourists would be able to do, or are some things shut down? Are there lines for things, or is it a different experience? Because I know you've been to Italy before. How do you compare the previous time with
Mm.
this time?
Totally different. It's like you have the place to yourself.
Really?
The Spanish Steps. Have you been to Rome and Venice before?
I've been to Rome. I've not been to Venice, but of course I've seen pictures and
Okay.
videos, and
Yeah.
whenever anything I see online or anything, and even in my experience in Rome, it's been extremely crowded. But in your situation, it's empty, eh?
Yeah. It was totally refreshing. It was a really great time to visit. Of course, there was a handful of tourists, but you could basically walk around all the main sites without being swarmed by crowds of other tour groups. And you actually heard Italian on the streets instead of many other languages. So it was good for um, my Italian skills just to be immersed in the
And
language a bit more.
are the locals happy to see you? I mean, seeing foreigners during this time, bringing business in, is it back kind of
Yeah,
there's an excitement there?
it's a good question.
Thank you.
So you're welcome. Um, I was also wondering whether they would be a bit hostile to tourists because they don't want people coming in and
Yeah,
spreading the virus. But I think the tourist numbers have dropped to such an extent that they're very happy to see people. In Rome, I could imagine if you're working in a shop, you can get a bit tired of all the people coming in and just speaking another language than your own. In the places that I went, servers, waiters, waitresses, and shopkeepers were much more open to having some small talk, a conversation, a
right.
lot less stressed. It was a much more relaxed vibe in the city than what I was used to before. So I really enjoyed it.
Have prices dropped due to COVID for things, or are they staying the same, or have they increased?
Hard to say. I think the real test is I've only been in Venice for about just over 24 hours. So
Okay.
Venice is like the tourist capital of the world.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see how much the prices have changed here. Whether they're
Yeah.
trying to like recoup lost money here by charging it more, or whether they're just going to try and, you know,
Yeah.
unload all the excess stock they have and do it for cheap. But for so far, I've seen it's pretty balanced. Nothing too dramatic.
Yeah. And as always, the most important question: have you seen George Clooney on your trip yet? Has he popped
Yeah,
up
I've been
anywhere?
lingering outside his hotel, but the security keeps saying, "Stay away. We'll arrest you next time if you show up." So I
Yeah.
think I'll go at night next time.
Yeah. That's good. All right, Dave. So it's your week to present. I'm excited. I don't know at all what you're going to present, but as always, I'm fascinated and I'm taking notes and I'll be looking stuff up. So take it away, Dave.
Well, I'm very excited to tell this story this week because it sort of brings together a couple of things we've been talking about on past episodes of Super
Okay.
Respectable. So, for one, the story is based in Venice, where I am, and there's touch points to like the current coronavirus, the pandemic, and to the first episode of Super Respectable when you talked about the island of dolls.
Oh, I'm excited. Okay.
Um, so, first of all, I better situate Venice for the listeners. I'm sure most are familiar with Venice, but most people just know like the main part of Venice. You know, where the gondoliers go by, all the beautiful architecture and the narrow streets and canals. But Venice is actually quite a big place. There's other islands and outlying islands, and I'm on one of them. I'm on the Venice Lido.
Okay.
So it's one of the big, long barrier islands, which protects Venice in a way from the sea.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know if you can picture Venice in your head, but if you look at it from Google Maps or satellite, the main island of Venice, if you could call it that, is it looks like a fish.
Okay.
The head of the fish is pointing towards the shore. The tail is out to the sea, and then you have these two long, really thin stretches of land on the island where I am. It's the Lido, and that's where I am. And then sprinkled in between and all around are small little outlying islands.
Yeah.
There's Murano, Burano, and they're famous respectively for lace and glass. But there's
Okay.
also the Giudecca, which is a nice place to spend some time and look at the city of Venice. And yeah, so yeah, Venice is absolutely a beautiful city. Totally recommend visiting in these quiet times. So paradoxically, I hope not everyone rushes to get there and makes it as crowded as it was in peak tourist times, which was,
Right.
I can tell you, the first time I went, it was quite unpleasant, and we didn't really want to spend too much time on Venice itself because
Yeah.
it was overwhelmingly busy, and it was seriously over touristed. So right now, there's no cruise ships, which makes a big difference because they would just unload hundreds of passengers, and yeah, it would just become very uncomfortable. But Venice is just, you can just see the wealth that the empire had, and it's just unbelievable. I was reading some of the history last night because I actually knew very little about Venice itself. The Venetian Republic actually lasted over 1,000 years. It's kind of mind blowing. From 697 AD to 1797 AD. It's an exceptionally long period of time. It was a massive trading power, and this small little place, you could just imagine the concentration of wealth and the amount of money they had to make these incredible feats of architecture and the art that they could put inside and
Yeah.
all that. It was fantastic. So, but there was a downside and a challenge that Venice faced because it was so densely populated. It was a trading center. They had ships coming in and out all the time. And yeah, it kind of had to deal with some health concerns and some plagues because during that period there was the Black Death and some quite significant plagues. So Venice, like much of Europe, had to deal with it probably more seriously than other parts because of its exposure to the rest of the world.
Yeah.
The story I'm going to tell is kind of the dark side and a bit of a haunted side of Venice, which not many people may know about.
Okay.
But I'll start off just mentioning it's a little fact that the word quarantine is derived from a Venetian word. It comes from,
Oh,
I'm not sure if you knew that.
I didn't, but that's very, very timely, right?
Absolutely. So the word comes from quarantena, meaning 40.
Okay.
And it represents the number of days that the ships and the passengers were required to be isolated from Venice before the passengers can disembark.
Right.
I believe they only did this during periods of like pandemic and plague. So they would, the Venetian authorities would impose this quarantena to prevent the spread into the city. So it's kind of interesting because like back then, the knowledge of public health was definitely not what it was today, but they still had the sense and understanding that you should keep sick people away from healthy people. Venice, being as it is geographically, they had the disadvantage of being densely populated on these little canals, but they had the advantage of having these small little outlying islands sprinkled around to stick people on.
Yeah.
And so they set up these quarantine stations on these islands. And these quarantine stations have the name Lazaretto.
Lazaretto.
Um, and so there were three Lazarettos.
Okay.
Lazaretto Vecchio, so that means old Lazaretto, Lazaretto Nuovo, new one, and Poveglia. So that's the one I want to talk about today.
Okay.
So it's quite interesting, actually. I last night when I was walking around the Lido,
Yeah.
I could see Poveglia
Yeah.
and Lazaretto Vecchio from where I was standing at the shore of the Lido. So it really is not far away. It's a very short boat ride away.
Yeah.
But it's a totally different world. It's a world of sickness and plague and death and destruction. So it's quite different from the romantic views people have, and most people probably have no idea that it's just sitting right in front of them. So Poveglia, it's just a really small 18-acre island just off of the Lido.
Yeah.
It was actually used as a quarantine island for a relatively short period of time. I think it was from the like mid 1700s to the early 1800s.
Yeah.
And it was, like I said, a place for sailors and the passengers to quarantine before they were allowed into Venice. So their experience was probably a bit like a lot of our experience during quarantine. They were just bored.
Yeah.
They were stuck on this island. There wasn't much to do. They could apparently send mail.
Right.
Their mail was heavily doused in something. I don't know whether the mail was actually legible by the time it received its...
Their version of a disinfectant, whatever we're using
exactly.
now. But,
whatever it was.
Yeah.
But otherwise, like people had rooms, they could eat and drink. This was in relatively normal times.
Right.
And when things got bad and there was like serious outbreaks of plague and a ship came and the passengers were sick, it became a miserable, horrible place.
Right. I can imagine. Yeah.
And there were times when, people were just sent there and it was basically like a death sentence.
Yeah.
So there'd be the passengers from the ships. They were unwell. They were dying. And then on Venice itself, Venice took quick action.
Right.
If anybody showed signs of sickness or they were showing signs of, whatever it was, the bubonic plague, they were quickly sent out to these islands. And it was basically a death sentence. And these people on Venice were apparently so freaked out of being sent there during these times that some of them started getting a bit crazy. And then that was perceived to be a symptom. And then they were sent there, even though they were healthy, but they were effectively sent to their death because they couldn't handle the stress of possibly being sent there. Yeah, so the people who, I guess they were the undertakers or the grave diggers, at times they couldn't keep up with the amount of people who were dying. Um,
Wow.
there were times, I think on the Lazaretto Vecchio, they'd have 400, 500 people dying per day. And there would just be, bodies piled on top of one another. Sometimes with people who hadn't even died yet, they were like on their deathbed, but they just were like thrown in with the rest of them.
Yeah, yeah, of
So it was
course.
pretty traumatic. Um, at times there was 3 to 4 to a bed. They just had real no regard at that point. They just figured get them out of Venice, keep Venice safe at all costs. So it became a really nasty place, and there were some estimates that up to 160,000 people had died on Poveglia alone.
Wow.
It's kind of hard to come by like precise numbers, obviously, since so much time has passed.
You're right.
But yeah, it's on a very small bit of land and a lot of death. So quite miserable. But the nasty history of that island does not end there.
Okay. There's always
Um,
something else.
in, there's always something else, a bit like your story of the Island of the Dolls. There's always something else. So in 1922, the Poveglia was turned into a mental asylum.
Of course, right? Of
Of
course it
course,
was.
that seemed like the right use of the former plague island. The main story from this mental asylum is that there was this apparently quite horrible doctor on this asylum
Yeah.
who was performing really horrific experiments um, on the patients in this asylum.
Okay.
Essentially, he was doing lobotomies, but from what I read, he was just torturing and doing really nasty things to these people using
Yeah.
chisels, hammers. Maybe he thought he was helping them because back then there was some weird movement that he thought lobotomy would help you if you had some mental disorder, but clearly that's not a thing we do anymore. And then the doctor himself died under mysterious circumstances when he fell from the asylum's bell tower.
Oh, no way.
On whether he fell, was pushed, committed suicide from the trauma that he inflicted on all the people, and he felt horrible and couldn't sleep at night.
Yeah.
Whatever the case may be, he died, and the asylum apparently kept running until 1968. So relatively recent times.
So in the latter part of the time, it was used more like that was when patients with mental illnesses would be sent there, as opposed to, and it wouldn't no longer be used as a quarantine station, right? It's moved to mental health at this point.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what happened from like the mid 1800s until when it opened as a mental asylum in
Right.
1922.
Yeah.
I think there was some involvement with the Napoleon. He got involved there, but
Okay.
so yeah. So since 1968, there has been a few attempts to sell the island. So
Yeah.
immediately after it closed, apparently there were a couple owners who took it on,
Yeah.
but they were so haunted and freaked out by what had happened there, they just couldn't handle it, and they just like gave it up, and
Difficult,
it kind of was in the hands of the Italian government or the Venetian municipality. I'm not quite sure who,
yeah.
but it really has been kind of dormant for decades. And the most recent attempt to sell it was in 2014 by the Italian government when it was really tough times for the Italian economy. So they were trying to raise some funds.
Yeah.
But again, some businessmen, I think he later became mayor of Venice, tried to buy it, but again, it failed. And now it's prohibited and illegal to go there. So you
Really
can see it, you can take a boat by it, but
can't
I
dock.
think it's the only island of these three which is forbidden to set foot on.
Wow.
And this, of course, makes it more tantalizing
Yeah, of
for
course, right?
explorers. People want what they can't have, right?
Even if you go onto Google right now, it on Google Maps it says in terms of description, it says small Venetian island closed to visitors.
Yeah, so that just makes it more freaky for people. It's like, why is it closed? What are they hiding there?
Of course. But like you were
Um,
saying that you can see it from Lido, like you can visually see it from the coast, like of where you are, or where
yeah,
if you walk around.
yeah.
Really?
Yeah, so what I want to do today is so I could more clearly see the Lazaretto Vecchio
Yeah.
from where I am. But
Yeah.
if I go further down, because the Lido is very long
Of
and
course.
narrow,
Yeah.
so it's a very easy bike ride. Just go straight down, and
Yeah.
then it's just off of the shore, maybe a 15-minute bike ride from where I am is the
Wow.
Poveglia. So I want to check that out today, and I'll
If
possibly add on to this report.
Yeah, of course. If you take some pictures or video, we can add it on our social media so people can see visuals of the story as well. That'd be fun.
Yeah, so I would like to encourage our listeners to go onto YouTube and just type in Poveglia and see. I haven't seen the videos myself, but there's a few people who've tried to go on the island.
Yeah.
Um, Apparently, in 2016, there were 5 Americans who were rescued by the Venice Fire Department
Yeah.
because they tried to spend the night there,
Yeah.
and so they took a water taxi. Most taxis would refuse to take you there. I don't
Yeah.
encourage people to go,
Yeah.
but they have found some relatively unscrupulous taxi driver, probably paid him or her a lot of money to take them there.
Yeah.
And their plan was to spend the night. But when night came, they just couldn't handle it. They also freaked out and were really scared of the place, and they were screaming. They just like so someone heard the screams,
Yeah.
and they were saved and were rescued. They couldn't handle spending the night there.
If it was optimal conditions, could you swim from the mainland to the island, or vice versa, or is it just it's just close visually but still a little far away? Like, is there a capability to swim? Like, what would you say the distance is between the two?
Uh, Hard to say. Maybe max a kilometer. I'm not quite sure.
Yeah. So
But I wouldn't recommend swimming because you might get taken out by one of the speedboats or vaporettos going by.
yeah.
But so, yeah, the other story is I can't confirm this. These are on all these kind of horror story websites, and they like
Right.
to play this aspect. So these seem a bit far fetched, but this is a couple of facts that are mentioned. They say the reason for it not being used is half of the soil is human ash and like decomposed flesh. They said 50%. So there
From the
are
point.
yards there, but the people refuse to cultivate the vines because of the nastiness of the soil. And the other one is that the fishermen, there are lots of fishermen in Venice,
Yeah.
they refuse to go and fish in the waters nearby because they're afraid of what they might catch. They don't want to pick up any bones. But apparently, one of the explorers who made it onto the island a decade ago said that's nonsense. They've seen a few fishing nets nearby. So that is a bit unconfirmed. I won't do my own research today. I will respect the Italian government's decision to
Yeah. Yeah.
make it an untouched site. But that is the story of Poveglia and the Plague Island. It is quite surprising to me. I really had no idea about it until I did some research because I wanted to tell a story about Venice since I was here.
Of
And I
course.
was blown away that there were these islands so close to such beauty, that there was such nastiness and horror.
You had mentioned at the onset that there are two other islands, right? Uh,
Yeah.
what are so? But you're allowed on those, and are those just tourist sites now, or have they been converted into some type of daily usage? Because are they functioning?
Yeah. So, from what I understand, you can go to these other two lazarettos, but you have to ask specifically to stop there. They won't stop there. It's very interesting if you ever visit Venice, which you
Yeah.
should. The public transport is these water taxis or vaporettos, and they all have stops like any other normal bus or metro would, but it's all by boat. And to make a stop at this Lazaretto, you have to specifically make a request. It's not a common destination. But I think you can go there. There's, I think, the usual church, cemetery, a few other things. It's relatively big, the Lazaretto, compared to Poveglia. Poveglia is quite tiny. I might check it out. I might check out one of the Lazarettos if I'm allowed to go there. But
Yeah.
yeah, you can visit those two places.
Are these natural islands or man-made islands? And the reason I ask that is because if you look on Google Maps of the Poveglia, there's like an octagon-shaped piece of land on the southern tip of it, and that looks very like that doesn't look natural.
Yeah, that's also a good question. I'm not sure that I think there's quite a few in Venice which are man-made, but
Yeah.
I believe that these islands are all natural. They're
Wow.
real.
It
They do
looks.
look unnatural, unnatural in the way that their borders are.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't look like a typical scraggly island that has, bits cutting out from it. It's like a, square, triangle, rectangle thing.
Yeah, because like
Uh,
as you were telling me this story, I was looking at not only this island, but as you mentioned, there's a number of islands in Venice, and a lot of them have been like, I guess, converted into resorts or hotels or like
mm,
but it's interesting that this one is so close to the mainland and has such a dark history and has been untouched, right? No one wants to do it because I would have imagined like a big brand like the Sheraton or the Mandarin Oriental or something would have come in and just been like, we'll just like graze the place down and build like a five-star skyscraper or something on it, right? But no one wants to go, like no one wants to touch it, eh? Like everyone just wants to leave it alone.
yeah, I guess. I mean, I was going to ask you what your thoughts were, and like what do you think should be done with it? Because,
Oh,
like you said, there's a bunch of really luxurious hotels that have ownership over entire islands here,
yeah,
and I think the problem would be the marketing. Come stay at this formerly
yeah,
plague site where there's a mental asylum may not get you 800 euros a night.
yeah.
Um,
I mean, like, well,
Except
there's
on
like,
Halloween.
of course, haunted islands and abandoned islands are like top three interesting things for me. So, like, I had read about this in the past, but I never really actually explored it. But I'm like just looking at the pictures now, and I think there's a key difference, right? When I presented about the island in Mexico, it was relatively smaller. It was only about one person and then a number of dolls. But here, if you look at the pictures, there's like actual like buildings. There's a bell tower. There are like trees that have grown around. There's a very kind of, it looks almost like a movie set, you know? It doesn't look real, but like it looks like something you would have seen in like Shutter Island. It's really creepy, eh? Like you can get lost in there, and
It is very creepy.
I'm just looking at a picture from someone who took a picture of it at sunset from Lido, and so you can see the bell tower, the silhouette of the entire island, but the bell tower is very distinguished.
Hmm.
But like you can imagine locals, they have to look at this thing like day in, day out and know the history of it, right? Whereas like tourists come and go. Maybe the government should just tear it down and at least keep it as a park or an open-ended thing until they figure out what's happening. Just to get rid of that dark history. It's just sitting there, right? Like no one's doing anything with it.
Yeah, in a way, I don't quite understand. I mean, I do want to maybe do some more research to understand why it's illegal to go there. It seems a bit extreme
Yeah.
to put that measure in. So it only adds to the conspiracy theories around it about what could be happening.
Have you seen this one picture of like graffiti inside the island? Someone's tagged the walls. So clearly, like the Utes of Italy, of Venice, have probably gone to the island and spray painted around. So it's probably one of those places where you go to kind of like hang out and chill out, or just run away from things, Or maybe it used to be, you steal your dad's boat, drive to the island.
Oh yeah, I mean, if I was a restless teenager hanging out on the Lido, I would be raring to go off and check out Poveglia.
If you've spoken to any of the locals, what do they say about the island?
I haven't had a chance, but that's a good point. If I come across some proper Venetians today, I will ask them their opinion. And
Yeah.
it's good to know. Little side note that there's a Venetian dialect, so
Oh, okay.
I should be able to pick up if a Venetian is walking past me because I won't understand anything they're saying. I'll be able to ask them something.
I understand the quarantine part. I think throughout history and even now, you'll see that isolation is a big part of quarantining, right? Of when a pandemic happens. So here they decided to do it physically on an island. But why is it always like? Why is it that mental institutions are always on islands too, or like isolated from people as well? Because like mental institutions in itself are creepy, but the fact that it's on this horrible island, I think, makes it worse, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I've never seen the movie Shutter Island, and I don't plan on it because then I would be scarred for life from ever thinking about going to Poveglia.
Yeah.
but yeah, I don't know what possesses people to do that. I guess the whole perception of the mentally ill back then was that they were somehow cursed and they need to be cast away, and there was really like a horrible existence for these people that they just weren't integrated into mainstream society, and they were exiled onto the islands. So these poor people, some of them just were just stuck there.
It's like surreal, the story. Because I've been looking at the pictures. There's a picture here of I guess just during the summertime, a bunch of boats kind of just, they're so close to the island, but they're just kind of on their own boats and yachts and stuff, but no one's going actually onto the island itself. But they're so close proximity wise, that it's fascinating, because usually these islands that have sad histories or kind of a mysterious realm about it, they're really far away. But this one's literally like visible, right? Like you said, it's literally right there.
Yeah, and of all the islands, it's untouched because I read a story about National Geographic
Yeah.
reported on Lazaretto Vecchio. There was some construction project that they were doing there, the Venetian authorities, and they came upon a mass grave of like 1,500 or 15,000 bodies, and they found that one of the skeletons had a brick in the mouth,
No way.
and they're freaked out, and they were doing some got some historian who said that's like how they dealt with um, perceived witches and people who were possessed. They just basically stuck a I don't think they killed them with a brick, but they put a brick in the body, in the mouth,
Yeah.
to basically, um, I guess, prevent anything from coming out, any of the evil spirits from coming out
Right.
of the mouth. Again, I'm not sure if this is just, you know, high-handed tales and there's a more simple explanation, but yeah, I hope that they do a bit more digging and exploring in Poveglia and open it up to the public, because I really don't see the reason. It looks quite nice. They should demystify it, and I'd be happy to check it out.
Yeah. But if they opened it to the public, like say you were the minister or you were the person in charge of opening up, would you do some renovations and make it more tourist friendly? Like, is there some work that needs to be done in your opinion, or is it like as is, you would show it off as a tourist site?
That's a good question. I mean, if I was the mayor, if the mayor of Venice is listening, hi mayor, I think you should just leave it as it is. Make it health and safety acceptable for tourists, so no one hurts themselves. But let them go in and walk around, and I'm sure people would pay good money to have an alternative experience in Venice.
Yeah, put in a Starbucks.
Please don't.
I'm joking. I'm looking at this one picture. It looks like a pretty recent picture, but it looks like they did some renovation work on the bell tower and the thing. I'll send you the thing. There's some scaffolding around, so maybe they do maintain it from time to time, at least the building structure, the integrity, or else it would fall apart, right? So maybe there are certain parts of the city that they just need to parts of the island and the building structure itself that they just do some touch up work on. But again, this is just based on pictures. I'm not really sure what the history is, but it does look pretty recent.
It's quite impressive just walking around even the Lido here, which is
Yeah,
quite a well-off part of Venice. There's tons of properties, villas for sale, which I'm shocked by because they've got such beautiful locations, such beautiful architecture,
yeah,
and they're just sitting there and they were there last time I was here too, 5 years ago. And I'm just wondering, like, why don't these wealthy investors come in and fix these things up? There's loads of these places in Venice. I guess the refurbishment costs must be huge, and there's probably cultural and historical things they need to preserve, which makes it
yeah.
a challenge.
Here in Istanbul, there's a part of the city which is like the old city, and like there's a lot of rules and regulations around renovation work there. That's why like you don't
Mm.
see any skyscrapers or any new buildings. Everything has to kind of be renovated, and I think it's such a hassle that like a lot of people don't want to just engage in it. I wonder if it's the same in Venice, that if it's just too difficult. Like you might get the property for a very cheap price, but the actual work afterwards might just add up then, and it'll be too much of a headache.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, it's a very challenging place to do work. You got everything has to be shipped in on the boat, and
Yeah.
yeah, I can only imagine the logistical nightmare.
Of course. Yeah, you had said one thing about the island. You had said that there are rumors or talk that 50% of the soil is kind of made up of human remains, right? And I'm just looking at this
Mm,
picture here. The way the island is shaped is that I think most of the buildings are on one section of the island, but the rest of the island is pretty much just fields, right? It's just grass and natural. And I'm just like, when I look at the
mm.
picture, I just thought human remains are underneath there, you know,
Oh, no.
potentially. So like, there's a lot,
Yeah. Well, we
like,
must be quite fertile, like good for fertilizer, because it looks very lush there.
oh my gosh, people are gonna listen to us and think we're psychopaths, but it's strange. It reminds me of Alcatraz for some reason, the island, the jail in San Francisco. Just both shape, structure,
That's
and
the thing, though. Like the Americans know how to make money. The Alcatraz you can visit. Tourists go there, right? Loads of people visit and make money for the city. So I would encourage the Venetian authorities to fix their
yeah.
massive budget deficit by opening this up to the public.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to end with my questions with the same question I asked you with 3 episodes back.
Sure,
If they open up this island for tourism, would you go?
absolutely.
Wow,
I
David
would
Lewis, first
during
one
the
there.
daytime. During the
Okay.
daytime.
Oh, condition. There's a condition, a sub clause. Yeah, during the daytime. Nothing good happens at night
I
at these places. So daytime.
well, that's the thing. Is like, what would you charge more to stay at night, or would it you charge less? I don't know.
Someone makes like a hotel out of it or an experience. I'm sure there's always people who would like love to stay at night in these places, you know. But I would go during the day with you at the height of day. That's my rule for
Right.
all my rule at the zenith of the sun, uh, midday, and then that's it. I call it quits in a tour, not individually. You know, in a group of people, so we don't lose one another. And then
Absolutely. We'd be holding hands
holding hands.
in non-corona times,
Yeah, non-corona times. So well done,
touching
Dave.
elbows.
There you go, touching elbows. This is very interesting. I really well done. I please take photos. Like we'd love to have like just live photos, and we'll post them. We'll post them on our Twitter and our Instagram and our social medias, and then we'll link it with the
For sure.
lesson. What's you're in Venice for a little bit longer, and are you going to see other parts of the country, or you're done with that? It's Venice and then back to the Netherlands,
It's Venice and then back to the Netherlands.
back to
And
reality. Huh?
yeah, well, the very cool thing about catching a flight from Venice Airport is you can take a boat to the airport.
That's
So,
so
so it
cool.
feels a bit like James Bond. Um, yeah, I'll be heading back by boat to the airport and then jetting off from there. But
Is
it's
the
a fun
is the
place.
is the airport on the mainland or is it on an island itself?
The airport is on the mainland. So
Oh,
just quickly, like Venice is quite a big place. A lot of the locals kind of got pushed off of the island because it got too expensive, and then
right.
a whole um, suburb, if you like, is on the mainland called Mestre and other areas. So it's quite developed all around the mainland. So
And when tourists come, do they ever go to the mainland or they just stick to Venice, the islands?
well, one of the really cool things of arriving in Venice by train, which we did, is there's a train that comes into Venice Mestre, which is on the mainland,
Yeah.
and then there's a train station on Venice itself. And
Oh,
so the
cool.
train crosses the lagoon, and you have this amazing view coming in, and you arrive right into the heart of Venice by train. So
Wow.
really cool way to arrive.
Wow, that's amazing. Well done,
Yeah.
David. Well done, David Lewis. That's
Thank you,
very,
Toshio.
that's very, very cool. Well, thank you for presenting. As always, it was fascinating, and I'm glad you're having a great time. I hope you guys stay safe and you get back to the Netherlands in one piece. And are you finding
Yeah,
that?
we're definitely using lots of hand sanitizer and going through lots of masks, but that's what you got to do.
Are you finding that it was like the taking that trip was a good decision? Like it's a good break from COVID. Is it helping out mentally, physically, emotionally?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
absolutely. Apprehensive, like I said at the beginning, but once you're in it, it's all good. You just take some precautions. I knock on wood and hope that we don't catch anything, but we'll keep our distance. We'll wash our hands, but we'll still enjoy our time here.
There you go. And to all our listeners, remember, keep your distance, wash your hands, and wear masks as always. Because Dave, we're still in the midst of this thing. I just looking at some numbers. We won't make people miserable with it, but it's still going on, right? It's still happening, and you got to take Dr. Marcus Lung's recommendations into practice to protect yourselves.
Yes, please listen to our previous podcast on the subject.
All right, Dave. Thank you so much. I will talk to you soon. Have a great one.
Cheers. Take care, everybody.